My name is Etta, 67 years old, and I thought I knew everything about my two wonderful children, Alex and Jennifer. After losing Frank, my husband of 45 years, to a heart attack 3 years ago, I finally decided to renovate our old bathroom. Living alone in our family home of 4 decades has been lonely. But my children visit often, so life felt stable until that fateful day when the plumber discovered something in my basement that changed everything forever. Before I continue this unbelievable story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to find out what dark secret was hiding beneath my feet all these years. Retirement should have been my golden years. After 36 years teaching second graders at Maplewood Elementary in our quiet Pennsylvania suburb, I thought I had earned my peaceful sunset days. Our neighborhood on Willow Lane had been home since Frank and I purchased this 2-story colonial back in 1982, when property values were still reasonable and neighbors knew each other by name. Frank was an accountant at Anderson Financial downtown, meticulous with numbers but wonderfully spontaneous in our personal life. His woodworking hobby filled our basement with handcrafted furniture and the sweet smell of cedar and pine. His heart attack 3 years ago came without warning during his morning jog. 1 minute planning our anniversary trip to Maine, the next minute gone forever. My son Alex followed his father into the world of numbers but channeled it into real estate development. At 42, he runs Riverside Properties, developing luxury condominiums along the waterfront that I could never afford on my teacher's pension. His wife Sophia teaches yoga and tends to their twin boys, Jacob and Thomas, now 12 years old, with their grandfather's same mischievous smile. Their Tudor-style home in Lakeside Estates screams success with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage. My daughter Jennifer took a different path. The marketing executive at 38 commands respect at Premier Brand Solutions, where she manages campaigns for national clients. Her divorce from Richard 4 years ago was messy but necessary after his multiple affairs. Their daughter Lily, 16 and fiercely independent, splits time between them, though Jennifer carries the heavier parenting load while Richard travels with his new girlfriend. Sunday dinners at my house became our post-Frank tradition. I prepare his recipes from the handwritten cookbook he kept serving, his famous pot roast or baked ziti, at precisely 5:30. The grandchildren set the table, while Alex and Jennifer bring wine and dessert. Only recently did I notice the tension between them, subtle glances and abrupt changes in conversation when I approached. I assumed it related to Jennifer's recent request for a loan that Alex apparently denied. Sibling squabbles never truly end, even in middle age. My daily routine provided the structure I needed after Frank died. Morning coffee on the back porch, watching Cardinals at the feeder. Tuesdays volunteering at the library. Wednesdays lunch with my retired teacher friends. Thursday gardening in the plot Frank built me for our 35th anniversary. Weekends with grandchildren when Jennifer needed breathing room. Between activities I read mysteries and worked crossword puzzles in Frank's old recliner, still carrying his scent of Old Spice and coffee. The bathroom renovation decision came after the hot water pipe behind the tub began leaking. The pink tile and brass fixtures dated back to 1976, and the cracked linoleum flooring had seen better days. While practical necessity drove the decision, it also symbolized my first major home change. Without Frank, my small declaration of moving forward while honoring our past. When I mentioned the renovation at Sunday dinner, both Alex and Jennifer reacted with unusual enthusiasm. Jennifer immediately pulled out her phone, scrolling through contractor websites. Alex offered to draw up plans and supervise the work personally despite his busy schedule. He even had a plumber he trusted implicitly from his development projects. "Mom, you need someone who understands these old houses," Alex insisted, his tone more forceful than the situation warranted. "These fly-by-night contractors will take advantage of a widow living alone." Jennifer nodded vigorously. "Listen to Alex on this one, Mom. Trevor is excellent and discreet. He knows exactly how to handle older plumbing systems." Their insistence struck me as odd but touching. Perhaps they worried about my financial situation or feared I might be swindled. I smiled and thanked them, but reminded them I had managed the household finances alongside Frank for decades. "I appreciate your concern, but I already asked Margaret next door for a recommendation. Her bathroom renovation turned out beautifully, and the plumber she used, Harold, had excellent reviews online." Alex's face tightened momentarily. "Well, at least let me talk to this Harold guy first. Make sure he gives you a fair quote." I patted his hand. "Sweetie, I may be getting older, but I can still negotiate my own contracts." The following Monday, Harold Winters arrived precisely at 9, just as promised. A solidly built man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and work-worn hands, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen every possible plumbing disaster and feared none of them. His company truck, meticulously maintained, despite its age, displayed Winters Plumbing and Heating family owned since 1972. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Thompson," he said, removing his work boots at the door without being asked. His respectful gesture reminded me of Frank, who always did the same. "Margaret speaks highly of you. Said you make the best apple pie in the county." I laughed, already comfortable with his unpretentious manner. "Call me Etta, please, and I hope my bathroom disaster won't scare you away." He smiled kindly. "In 30 years of plumbing, I've yet to meet a bathroom I couldn't fix." As I showed him around my outdated bathroom, with its leaking pipes and water-stained ceiling, I felt an unexpected sense of hope. This renovation represented more than just fixing pipes. It was about reclaiming my home and my life after loss. Little did I know that this simple bathroom project would uncover secrets that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my perfect family. Harold began work promptly the next morning, carefully removing the cracked pink tiles around the tub to access the leaking pipe. By midday, he had opened a section of wall and frowned at what he discovered. "Mrs. Thompson, Etta," he corrected himself, pointing to the exposed plumbing. "These pipes are routed unusually. According to the original house plans, you showed me the main water line should run straight down to the basement from here. But someone has added this complex junction that diverts significant water pressure elsewhere." I peered at the tangle of copper pipes, understanding little of their function, but noting Harold's concern. "Is that a problem for the renovation?" "Not directly, but I'll need to trace the line to make sure we won't disrupt water flow to other parts of the house." He hesitated. "Including your basement." My basement. The thought sent an unexpected pang through my chest. After Frank died, I rarely ventured down there. His woodworking tools remained untouched. His last unfinished rocking chair still clamped to the workbench, waiting for hands that would never return. The basement had become a mausoleum to my grief. Too painful to visit, but too precious to disturb. "Is there anything unusual about your basement that I should know about?" Harold asked, watching my expression carefully. "Any recent work done down there?" The question triggered a memory. About 6 months ago, Alex and Jennifer had surprised me with what they called a grief anniversary gift to mark 2.5 years since Frank's passing. They proposed renovating the basement into a recreation room for when grandchildren visited. "You never go down there anymore," Mom Jennifer had said. "Let us transform it into something joyful." I had resisted initially protective of Frank's sacred space, but they insisted it would help me heal. They arranged everything, hiring workers who came while I visited my sister in Florida for 2 weeks. When I returned, they told me the work was nearly complete but not ready to reveal. They changed the basement door lock, explaining they wanted the final result to be a true surprise. Despite my curiosity, I respected their wishes, touched by what seemed like a thoughtful gesture. My children renovated it recently, I told Harold. As a surprise for me, I actually haven't seen the final result yet. Harold's eyebrows rose slightly. They renovated your basement, but you haven't seen it. They want to reveal it when it's completely finished. I explained, suddenly hearing how strange it sounded out loud. They changed the lock to keep it a surprise. So, you don't have access to your own basement. Harold's tone remained casual, but something in his eyes sharpened. Well, when you put it that way. I laughed nervously. I suppose it does sound odd. As the day progressed, I noticed Harold growing increasingly quiet, his usual cheerful whistling replaced by thoughtful silence. He made several trips to his truck for additional tools, and I caught him taking photos of the pipe configurations with his phone. During his lunch break, Harold asked seemingly innocuous questions about my family while eating the sandwich I had prepared. "Your children visit often?" he asked between bites. "Every Sunday for dinner, and sometimes during the week. Alex has a key to check on me, and Jennifer drops off Lily occasionally when she has business trips. Who else has access to your home?" "Just family. Alex, Jennifer, and the cleaning service that comes every other Thursday." I tilted my head, curious about his interest. "Why do you ask?" "Just getting a sense of the household water usage patterns," he said smoothly, though something in his expression suggested there was more to his questions. That afternoon, Alex arrived unexpectedly, claiming he was in the neighborhood and wanted to check on the renovation progress. His eyes darted nervously to where Harold was working, visible tension in his shoulders. "How's it going?" "Finding everything you need?" Alex asked Harold in an overly friendly tone that sounded strained to my ears. "Just addressing some unusual pipe configurations," Harold replied evenly. "Someone added extensive additional plumbing that runs to the basement. Not standard for these models. Would you happen to know anything about that?" Alex's smile tightened. The previous owners probably made modifications. "Listen, about the basement pipes, I think it would be better if you leave those alone. My guy Trevor is coming next week to handle some finishing touches on our renovation gift for Mom. He can address any basement plumbing issues. The thing is, Mr. Thompson, I can't properly fix your mother's bathroom without understanding how all the connected pipes function. Everything in plumbing is interconnected." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them until Alex turned to me. "Mom, could you give us a minute to discuss the technical details?" Reluctantly, I stepped into the kitchen, but remained close enough to hear their muffled conversation grow heated. Though I couldn't make out specific words, the tension was unmistakable. When I returned with coffee, Alex was leaving, his face flushed with barely contained anger. "Sorry, Mom. Emergency at work. Call me if you need anything." He kissed my cheek mechanically and left without acknowledging Harold. After the front door closed, Harold stood silently for a moment before asking quietly, "Etta, how well do you really know your children as adults?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes people change when we're not looking, especially after experiencing loss." He seemed about to say more when my phone rang, Jennifer's name flashing on the screen. "Mom." Her voice sounded unnaturally high. "How's the bathroom coming along?" "Fine, dear. The plumber is making good progress." "What exactly is he working on today?" The forced casualness in her tone mirrored Alex's earlier behavior. Just fixing the leaking pipes and checking the water flow. He mentioned something about connections to the basement. A beat of silence. The basement. Why would he need to check the basement? Apparently, our plumbing is all connected. Is that a problem? No. No, of course not. It's just that the surprise isn't ready. Please make sure he doesn't go down there. Okay, it would ruin everything we've planned. After promising to respect their surprise, I hung up increasingly puzzled by my children's behavior. That evening, I found myself unable to focus on my mystery novel, replaying the day's strange interactions. Sunday dinner, 2 days later, brought more peculiarities. When I mentioned Harold examining the pipes leading to the basement, Alex nearly choked on his wine, while Jennifer quickly changed the subject to Lily's upcoming school play. Later, while clearing dessert plates, Lily casually mentioned, "Grandma, when will you finally get to see the basement project? Dad says it's taking forever because they keep having to fix things." Jennifer sharply cut her off. "Lily, that's enough. It's supposed to be a surprise." "What kind of things needed fixing?" I asked innocently. "Nothing important," Alex interjected. "Just some minor details to make it perfect for you." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a growing unease settling in my stomach. Why were my children so protective of the basement? Why had Harold seemed so concerned about the pipes? For the first time, I wondered what exactly lay beneath my feet in the space that once belonged to Frank, now locked away from me in my own home. Harold arrived for the third day of renovation, looking tired with shadows under his eyes, suggesting a restless night. He carried not only his usual toolbox, but also a small case I hadn't seen before. "Good morning, Etta," he said, his typically cheerful greeting subdued. "I hope you don't mind, but I did some research last night on your home's original construction. The pipe configuration was bothering me." "Find anything interesting?" "Actually, yes." He spread blueprint copies on my kitchen table. "These are the original plans for your model home from county records. According to these, there have been significant structural modifications that aren't documented in any permits I could find." He pointed to several areas marked with yellow highlighter. "These walls shouldn't be where they are now, and these water and electrical lines have been rerouted extensively, much more than would be needed for a typical recreation room renovation." A memory surfaced of finding unfamiliar hardware store receipts on my kitchen counter several months ago. When questioned, Alex had quickly claimed they were for shelving units. He was installing in his own garage, taking the receipts before I could examine them closely. "Harold, what exactly are you suggesting?" He chose his words carefully. "I'm not suggesting anything specific yet, but as a licensed contractor, I'm obligated to investigate unusual modifications, especially when they might impact safety." His concern prompted me to reflect on other oddities I'd previously dismissed. The unexplained mechanical humming I sometimes heard late at night, which Alex had attributed to the new energy-efficient HVAC system they'd supposedly installed as part of the renovation. The missing toolbox from Frank's collection that Jennifer claimed she'd borrowed for a home project. The electricity bills that had nearly doubled over the past year, despite my unchanged habits. Most troubling was the realization that the basement door now featured an electronic keypad lock, far more sophisticated than necessary for a simple surprise renovation. I had no code to access it, and my old key no longer worked. Etta, Harold said, gently interrupting my thoughts. "Has your water usage increased significantly in recent months?" "Yes, actually. The water company even sent a letter suggesting I might have a leak. Harold nodded grimly. The pipes I've discovered are feeding something in your basement that requires significant water and electricity, more than any normal household function would need. He hesitated before continuing. I've also noticed your children seem unusually concerned about my access to certain areas of your plumbing system. The implication hung in the air between us. I thought about the late-night visits I'd noticed headlights in my driveway at 2 or 3 in the morning, when Alex thought I was asleep. Jennifer's increased interest in my schedule, always wanting to know when I would be away from home. The way they both seemed to communicate silently in my presence, a subtle nod or glance, conveying messages I wasn't meant to understand. Harold opened the case he'd brought, removing several testing vials and a digital device. With your permission, I'd like to take some water samples from different points in your system. I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. Do whatever you need to do. While Harold collected samples from various faucets, I searched through old photo albums in the living room bookcase. There, in pictures of Frank's woodworking projects, I could see the original basement layout. Comparing the dimensions to what I remembered, something seemed off about the current configuration based on the door location. The basement should have been smaller than it now appeared from the outside. Harold's phone rang, and he stepped onto the porch to take the call. Through the window, I watched his expression grow increasingly serious, his free hand running anxiously through his hair. When he returned, his face had paled considerably. "Everything okay?" I asked. Before he could answer, the front door opened as Jennifer walked in unannounced, freezing when she saw Harold's testing equipment spread across the kitchen counter. "Mom, what's going on here?" Her voice was tight eyes, fixed on the water samples. "Harold is just checking our water quality. Apparently there might be some issues." Jennifer's gaze snapped to Harold. "That wasn't part of the bathroom renovation. You should have consulted us before conducting tests." "Us?" I questioned. "Why would Harold need to consult you about work in my house?" "I just meant," she faltered. "Alex and I are helping you manage this project. We don't want you getting overcharged for unnecessary tests. These tests are standard procedure when I encounter unusual plumbing configurations," Harold stated calmly, "and I don't charge extra for them." Jennifer stepped between us, her back to Harold as she faced me. "Mom, I think we should get a second opinion. This is getting out of hand. Let's call Trevor and—" "Why are you so concerned about Harold checking our plumbing, Jennifer?" I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "This is my house, and I have every right to know what's happening in it, including my own basement." "It's not about rights, Mom. It's about trust." Jennifer's voice rose. "Can't you just trust that Alex and I are looking out for you, that we want to surprise you? Why do you have to ruin everything with suspicion?" Her outburst shocked us both into silence. After a tense moment, she grabbed her purse. "I need some air. We'll talk about this later." After Jennifer stormed out, Harold placed the testing device on the counter between us. "Etta, these preliminary results show chemical traces that shouldn't be in a residential water system. Solvents, alkaloids, and other compounds I can't identify without more sophisticated testing." "What does that mean?" "I'm not entirely sure, but I have a friend in law enforcement who might be able to help us understand." He hesitated. "There's something else. My buddy at the building department checked the records. The permit for your basement renovation was filed under a company name, not your children's names. The company traces back to a shell corporation with some concerning connections." My hands trembled as I lowered myself into a kitchen chair. "Are you saying my children are involved in something illegal?" "I can't say for certain yet," but I think we need to see what's in that basement. Not tomorrow, but today, before anyone has a chance to remove evidence." That evening, I found myself searching through Frank's old desk, looking for anything that might provide answers. In his meticulous records, I found the original basement measurements from when he'd installed shelving. Comparing them to the current exterior dimensions confirmed my suspicion the basement now extended beyond its original footprint, somehow expanded during the renovation. Around midnight, I was startled awake by the sound of a key in the front door. Footsteps moved quietly through the house, heading directly to the basement door. From my darkened bedroom doorway, I glimpsed Alex's silhouette punching numbers into the electronic keypad. The basement door opened, washing him briefly in an unnatural bluish light before closing behind him. I returned to bed, but didn't sleep, questions multiplying in my mind as I waited for morning to come, bringing Harold and whatever answers waited in my basement. Harold arrived at 7:30, an hour earlier than scheduled, his truck parked a block away as we had arranged via text the previous night. His face was drawn with worry as he carried a backpack and what looked like specialized equipment into my kitchen. "I spoke at length with my friend in law enforcement," he said, without preamble. "Detective Scott Anderson. We go way back to high school. I described what I've observed and the test results. He's very concerned, Etta." "Concerned enough to get a warrant?" I asked. "That's complicated. Without concrete evidence, it's just suspicious circumstances. As the homeowner, you have every right to access all parts of your property. But if we find what Scott suspects we might find," he trailed off. "What exactly does he suspect?" Harold set his coffee mug down carefully. "Based on the water usage patterns, chemical traces, electrical modifications, and the shell company connections, he believes your basement may have been converted into a clandestine laboratory for manufacturing synthetic drugs." The words hung in the air like poison. My children, my Alex and Jennifer, involved in drug manufacturing. It seemed impossible, yet a dozen small inconsistencies suddenly aligned into a coherent, terrible picture. "What's in the backpack?" I asked, nodding toward his gear. "Air quality monitor, better chemical testing equipment, and a camera to document what we find." He hesitated. "Scott recommended I bring these. He's standing by if we need official intervention, but suggested we confirm our suspicions first." "Then let's do it now," I said, with determination that surprised us both. "I checked this morning. The basement door is unlocked. Alex must have forgotten to reset the lock when he left last night." We approached the basement door together, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain Harold could hear it. The electronic keypad showed a steady green light, indicating an unlocked status. Harold pulled latex gloves from his pocket, handing me a pair. "Just in case," he said quietly. "Try not to touch anything more than necessary." The door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing a staircase illuminated by recessed lighting that hadn't existed before the renovation. The familiar scent of Frank's woodshop that I'd cherished was gone, replaced by an antiseptic chemical odor that burned slightly in my nostrils. Harold switched on his flashlight despite the lighting, and we descended slowly, each step bringing us closer to a truth I was increasingly certain I didn't want to face. At the bottom of the stairs, I gasped audibly. My husband's cozy workshop had vanished completely. In its place stood what looked like a sophisticated laboratory that would not have been out of place at a pharmaceutical company. Stainless steel tables lined the walls, holding complex glass apparatus, digital scales, and electronic equipment I couldn't identify. Computer monitors displayed chemical formulas and production schedules. A ventilation system hummed quietly, far more advanced than anything that belonged in a residential home. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hand covering my mouth in horror. Harold moved methodically around the space, his air quality monitor beeping softly as he photographed everything without touching. He pointed to a series of large plastic containers connected to the water lines he'd been investigating. "This explains the water usage. They're using substantial amounts for cooling and processing." He gestured to another area. "And these ventilation modifications explain the electrical consumption." In one corner stood a large safe, its heavy door closed, but not fully latched. Harold carefully opened it with his gloved hand to reveal stacks of cash and multiple laptops. "Financial records," he murmured, photographing but not disturbing the contents. I moved as if in a nightmare to a desk. In the corner, my eyes drawn to a framed photo I recognized as belonging to Alex. It showed him with business associates at a charity golf tournament, people I had met at various family functions over the years. Next to it lay a leather portfolio embossed with his initials, ATT Alexander Thomas Thompson. With trembling hands, I opened the portfolio to find detailed schedules, contact information, and what appeared to be distribution routes. This wasn't just evidence of my children's involvement. It was proof that Alex was a principal operator. "Harold," I called weakly, "look at this." He examined the documents, his expression grim. "These are organized distribution networks, professional-level operations." In another area, hidden behind a partition wall, we discovered marketing materials bearing the logo of Jennifer's company, Premier Brand Solutions. Closer inspection revealed they contained coded language that, according to Harold's hushed explanation, was commonly used to advertise illicit products to potential buyers. "When did they start this?" I asked, more to myself than Harold. "How long has this been happening right under my feet?" The answer came from a ledger book found in another drawer. The first entry dated back 3 years and 2 months ago, just weeks after Frank's funeral. As I flipped through the pages, the operation had clearly grown from small-scale production to a sophisticated enterprise generating millions in revenue. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A medical folder containing Frank's name. Inside were copies of his autopsy report, toxicology results, and handwritten notes in what I recognized as Alex's precise script analyzing the breakdown of certain compounds in Frank's system. "Harold," I whispered, my voice breaking, "I think they might have. My husband, Frank." He looked over my shoulder, his face hardening as he read the notes. "Etta, these indicate intentional, gradual poisoning with substances that mimic heart disease symptoms. We need to call Detective Anderson immediately." Before he could reach for his phone, it rang in his pocket. Harold stepped away to answer, speaking in urgent whispers. When he returned, his face had lost all color. That was Scott. Someone at the building department tipped off their contacts about our records request. "He just received information that your children have connections to very dangerous people who supply chemicals for their operation, and they're on their way here now." As if to confirm his warning, we heard car doors slamming outside. Through a small basement window, I glimpsed Alex's black SUV and Jennifer's silver sedan parking hurriedly in my driveway. Harold grabbed my arm, his voice intense but controlled. "Etta, we need to leave immediately. These people aren't just your children anymore. They're involved with dangerous criminals who won't hesitate to eliminate threats to their operation." "But my grandchildren," I protested weakly. "They're not here right now, and we can't help them if we're not safe ourselves." He guided me quickly toward the stairs. "Pack your things and leave immediately. Don't tell your kids where you're going." As we reached the top of the stairs, the front door opened. Harold pulled me into the hallway bathroom, closing the door, just as Alex called out, "Mom, you home?" Harold's eyes met mine in the bathroom mirror, his whispered words sending ice through my veins. "Pack your things and leave immediately. Don't tell your kids." Through the door, I heard Jennifer's voice. "Her car's here. Check the basement. Make sure everything's secure." In that moment, staring into the haunted eyes of my own reflection, I finally accepted the horrifying truth. The children I had raised, loved and trusted, had not only betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, but may have murdered their own father. My entire family life had been built on a foundation of lies that was now crumbling beneath me. With Harold's help, I slipped out the back door while my children were checking the basement. I threw some clothes and essential documents into a suitcase, grabbed the framed photo of Frank from our wedding day, and left behind everything else, including the illusion of the perfect family I had cherished for so long. "You'll stay with my sister Doris temporarily," Harold explained as he drove us away from my neighborhood. "She lives alone since her husband passed, and her address isn't connected to mine in any records. You'll be safe there until we figure out next steps." My mind struggled to process the seismic shift in my reality. Just days ago, I was a retired teacher renovating her bathroom. Now I was essentially a fugitive, fleeing from my own children who might be murderers. "I still can't believe it," I whispered, watching familiar streets pass by through tears. "How could they do this? In our home, where they grew up. How could they possibly have hurt Frank?" Harold gave me a sympathetic glance. "People change, Etta. Sometimes gradually, sometimes all at once, when opportunity or desperation presents itself. The important thing now is to keep you safe while the authorities investigate." My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and texts from both Alex and Jennifer. The messages started with casual inquiry about my whereabouts, escalating rapidly to demands and thinly veiled threats. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk. That plumber is not who he claims to be. He's dangerous. Call me immediately. Your safety is at risk. If you've gone to the police with ridiculous accusations, you need to come home now before you destroy this family." The final message from Alex chilled me to the bone. "Think about the kids, Mom. Lily, Jacob, and Thomas need their grandmother. Don't make us explain to them why you've disappeared. Some things, once done, can't be undone." Harold's sister Doris was a kind woman in her 70s who asked no questions when we arrived at her modest bungalow on the other side of town. She simply showed me to her spare bedroom and pressed a cup of tea into my shaking hands. "Any friend of Harold's is welcome here," she said firmly. "Stay as long as you need." Detective Diana Wright arrived that evening, her no-nonsense demeanor somewhat softened by compassionate eyes. In her early 50s, with cropped silver hair and a pantsuit that had seen better days, she projected competence and determination. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm handling your case personally," she explained, setting up a recording device on Doris's kitchen table. "Based on Harold's documentation and the preliminary investigation, we're dealing with a sophisticated operation. I need to ask you some difficult questions." Over the next 2 hours, I learned the devastating extent of my children's criminal activities. Detective Wright explained that Alex's real estate development company primarily existed to launder money from drug sales, while Jennifer's marketing firm created networks for distribution under the guise of legitimate business. Relationships. "We've been investigating this network for nearly a year," she admitted, "but we never connected it to your children until Harold's report. They've been extremely careful creating layers of shell companies and using professional intermediaries." "Who else is involved?" I asked, thinking of neighbors and friends who might be part of this nightmare. We've identified several collaborators in your community. The Wilsons 3 doors down from you, who always host those elaborate Christmas parties. They handle regional distribution. Your children's involvement extends to at least 5 counties, possibly interstate. The revelation about the Wilsons who had brought me homemade soup when Frank died sent me to the bathroom to vomit. Nothing in my world remained untainted. When I returned, Detective Wright addressed the most painful question. Mrs. Thompson, we're reopening the investigation into your husband's death. The notes Harold photographed suggest foul play, and we've already requested exhumation orders to conduct new toxicology tests. Why would they kill their own father? I whispered. The timeline suggests the operation began almost immediately after his death. Perhaps he discovered something, or they needed his life insurance money as startup capital. The policy paid out double for accidental death, correct? I nodded numbly, remembering how Alex had handled all the insurance paperwork, insisting I was too grief-stricken to manage it myself. What about my grandchildren? I asked, my heart breaking anew. Are they safe? Do they know anything about this? We have no evidence suggesting the children are aware or involved. Their safety is a priority, but we must approach this carefully. Your son and daughter likely suspect you've discovered their operation by now. They'll be watching the children closely. Detective Wright outlined a plan to have me meet with Alex and Jennifer at the police station under the pretext of discussing Frank's estate. We'll create a scenario that doesn't raise their suspicions, record the conversation, and use what we gather as evidence. You want me to face them, to pretend I don't know what they've done. The thought seemed impossible. You're the only one they might let their guard down around. This could be our best chance to gather unimpeachable evidence, especially regarding your husband's death. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in a conference room at the police station, wearing a hidden microphone and fighting waves of nausea. Detective Wright had created an elaborate pretense about an insurance company finding discrepancies in Frank's policy that required family signatures to resolve. When Alex and Jennifer entered, their expressions of concern seemed so genuine that for one disorienting moment I questioned everything. Could there be some explanation I hadn't considered? Then I remembered Frank's medical file and the coldness in Alex's notes about his dying according to schedule. Mom, thank God, Jennifer rushed to embrace me. We've been worried sick. Where have you been? That plumber, Alex interjected, remaining standing, while Jennifer sat beside me. He's been feeding you lies, hasn't he? He's under investigation himself for fraud and wanted to distract attention by making wild accusations. I stuck to the script Detective Wright had prepared. I needed some time alone to think. Margaret let me stay in her guest room while I sorted things out. Alex visibly relaxed. Well, you could have called. We thought something terrible had happened. Like what I asked innocently. They exchanged glances before Jennifer answered smoothly. With your heart condition, we worried you might have fallen ill somewhere alone. I had no diagnosed heart condition, a fact they both knew perfectly well. The implication was clear. They were establishing groundwork for another natural death, if necessary. We proceeded through discussions of the fictional insurance matter, their responses growing increasingly impatient. I don't understand why this couldn't wait, Alex complained, checking his watch repeatedly. Some of us have legitimate businesses to run. The word legitimate was my breaking point. Like your business in my basement, I asked quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Jennifer's hand, which had been resting on my arm, withdrew as if burned. What are you talking about, Mom? Her voice maintained its concerned daughter tone, but her eyes had hardened to flint. I saw the laboratory. I saw everything. Alex's demeanor transformed from concerned son to calculating criminal in an instant. Whatever you think you saw has a perfectly reasonable explanation. Does it? Does Frank's medical file in your desk have a reasonable explanation too? The one with your notes about poison levels? Jennifer gasped, genuine shock crossing her face as she turned to Alex. You kept records. You promised you destroyed everything. It was the confession we needed. Alex realized their mistake too late, lunging across the table toward me with such fury that I barely recognized him as my son. You stupid old woman. Do you have any idea what you've done? Two officers burst into the room as Alex's hands reached for my throat, restraining him while Detective Wright entered with arrest warrants. Jennifer collapsed in her chair, all pretense evaporating as she began to sob. He made me do it, she wailed, pointing at her brother. It was Alex's idea from the start. Dad found his initial setup in the garden shed and threatened to go to the police. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Alex struggled against the officers, his face contorted with rage. Shut up, Jennifer. Not another word. He turned his venomous gaze to me. This isn't over. Our associates won't let this operation fail. They know where Lily's school is, where the twins play soccer. Think about that, Mother. His threat against my grandchildren sent ice through my veins, but Detective Wright assured me as they were led away, we're already arranging protection for the children and securing all their locations. Your son is trying to manipulate you, but his network is being dismantled as we speak. Within hours, news broke of coordinated raids across the county. The Wilsons' home 3 of Alex's development properties and Jennifer's office building were simultaneously searched by police and DEA agents. 27 people were initially arrested, with more apprehensions expected. The most heartbreaking moment came that evening when social services contacted me about the children. Lily had been taken into protective custody from Jennifer's home, while Sophia had fled with the twins, apparently aware enough of her husband's activities to fear arrest herself. We located them at a motel near the state line, the social worker explained gently. Sophia is being questioned, but isn't currently facing charges. Her parents have agreed to take custody of the boys temporarily. As for Lily, would you be willing to take responsibility for her once we complete a safety assessment of your living situation? Of course, I answered without hesitation, though at that moment I had no home to offer her, having fled with only a suitcase of belongings. That night alone in Doris's spare bedroom, I wept for hours, mourning not only Frank's murder, but the death of every cherished family memory. Had anything been real? Had my children always been capable of such callousness, or had some critical parenting failure on my part created the monsters they became? The questions tormented me as dawn broke, bringing no answers, only the parent, certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months passed in a surreal blur of courtrooms, temporary accommodations, and painful revelations. Under the Witness Protection Program, I became Eleanor Turner, 67-year-old widow, recently relocated from Oregon, living in a modest apartment in Colorado. My auburn hair, dyed brown for decades, returned to its natural silver, and new glasses completed the transformation. The trial preparation consumed my days working with prosecutors to build airtight cases against not only my children, but their extensive criminal network. The evidence recovered from my basement proved invaluable, documenting nearly 3 years of manufacturing operations that had distributed drugs throughout 5 states. Forensic accountants traced over $12 million through Alex's various shell companies. Most devastating were the results from Frank's exhumed remains, confirming he had been systematically poisoned with a sophisticated compound that induced symptoms of heart disease, administered in small doses over approximately 4 months before his death. Alex's computer contained research on the compound, along with a detailed schedule of administration that matched dinner dates at our home, where he had insisted on serving his father personally. The premeditation was chilling in its methodical efficiency. The first time I entered the courtroom to testify against my own children, my legs nearly gave way. Alex sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, his expression impassive, refusing to meet my eyes. Jennifer, being tried separately after accepting a plea deal, had already provided extensive testimony against her brother and the larger organization. Mrs. Thompson, the prosecutor, began, "Please tell the court about your relationship with your son prior to discovering the laboratory in your basement." For hours I recounted our family history, describing the loving son I thought I had raised, the gradual changes I had noticed but dismissed, and finally the horrifying discoveries that shattered our family forever. Throughout my testimony, Alex maintained his cold detachment, but when I described finding Frank's medical file, something in him snapped. He leapt to his feet, pointing at me accusingly. "You want to talk about family betrayal?" he shouted before his attorney could stop him. "How about turning against your own children? What kind of mother testifies against her son? You're dead to me. You hear that, dead?" The judge ordered him removed until he could compose himself, but his words echoed in my nightmares for weeks afterward. Jennifer's situation proved more complex. During a supervised visit allowed by the court, she sat across from me in a conference room, her prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame, eyes hollow with regret. "I never wanted Dad to die," she whispered. "When Alex first suggested using the basement for production, it was supposed to be temporary, just enough to get me through the financial disaster after my divorce. Then Dad found equipment in the garden shed where Alex was testing the process. He confronted us, threatened to go to the police." She wiped tears with her sleeve. "Alex convinced me Dad would destroy all our lives, that we'd both go to prison, and Lily would end up in foster care. He said the heart medication would just make Dad sick enough to scare him into keeping quiet. I swear I didn't know he was increasing the dosage." Whether I believed her partial innocence claim or not became irrelevant. Jennifer had still participated in a criminal enterprise and concealed her father's murder. The court sentenced her to 12 years with possibility of parole, while Alex received consecutive life sentences for first-degree murder and drug manufacturing. The children suffered the greatest innocent casualties. The twins Jacob and Thomas now lived with Sophia's parents in Arizona, their mother having accepted a plea deal for lesser charges of money laundering. I received occasional school photos and progress reports through my victim advocate, but their grandparents remained wary of contact with their father's family. Lily's situation proved the most hopeful. After 3 months in a specialized youth trauma program, she came to live with me in Colorado. At 17, she carried the burden of her mother's crimes with a maturity beyond her years. We rebuilt our relationship carefully, finding common ground in our shared betrayal and determination to create something honest from the ashes of deception. The family home, my sanctuary for 40 years, had to be sold after being released as a crime scene. Entering it one final time to collect remaining belongings felt like visiting a museum of a life that no longer existed. Each room echoed with memories now tainted by knowledge of what had happened beneath our feet, while we shared meals and celebrated holidays above. In Frank's desk, untouched since his death, I found a journal I hadn't known existed. The final entries confirmed my worst fears while offering a measure of bittersweet comfort. Concerned about A's new business associates, he had written 2 weeks before his death. Strange deliveries to garden shed confronted him today. Denial, then anger, unlike anything I've seen from him. We'll talk to Jay tomorrow, then consider next steps. something very wrong happening with our children. Frank had sensed the danger, had tried to intervene, and had paid the ultimate price for his parental concern. I took cold comfort in knowing he had died still being the man of integrity I had loved for nearly 5 decades. The most surprising support came from Harold, whose decision to investigate beyond a simple bathroom renovation had unraveled the entire criminal enterprise. He checked in regularly, first professionally, then as a friend who understood the unique pain of my situation. You know, he told me during one visit most people would have ignored the signs. They would have convinced themselves nothing was wrong, especially when it involved family. Your courage saved lives, Etta. The drugs your children were producing killed 23 people that we know of. Without you, that number would have been much higher. His words provided small comfort against the crushing guilt I felt, questioning every parenting decision I'd ever made, wondering where I had gone so terribly wrong. The therapist specialized in family trauma helped me understand that while I would always carry this pain, I wasn't responsible for the choices my adult children had made. Some people, she explained gently, can compartmentalize morality so completely that they justify any action that serves their purposes. Your children didn't become this way because of poor parenting. They chose paths of greed and selfishness, despite good parenting. As months became a year, I slowly rebuilt my life in unexpected ways. I began volunteering at a support group for families of incarcerated individuals, particularly parents grappling with their children's crimes. My experience, though extreme, provided perspective for others walking similar painful journeys. One evening, sitting on my small apartment balcony, watching the Colorado sunset with Lily doing homework nearby, I realized I had survived what I once thought would destroy me completely. The family I had known was gone, but in its place, something new and authentically honest had begun to grow, founded not on illusions, but on the hard truth of our shared experiences and the choice to move forward with integrity, just as Frank would have wanted. 1 year and 3 months after the plumber discovered my children's terrible secret, I celebrated my 69th birthday in my new apartment in Boulder, Colorado. The modest 2-bedroom unit overlooking a community garden bore little resemblance to my former home, but the fresh start it represented had become precious to me. Lily, now 18 and preparing for college, had arranged a small gathering. Harold and his sister Doris had driven from neighboring Wyoming, where they had retired together, and Detective Wright, now a close friend I called Diana, brought a lopsided homemade cake that made us all laugh. Grandma Ellie Lilly said, using my new identity that had gradually become comfortable, blow out the candles and make a wish. My wish remained unspoken, but profound continued healing for all the innocent lives shattered by my children's choices, particularly my grandchildren. Her outburst shocked us both into silence. After a tense moment, she grabbed her purse. "I need some air. We'll talk about this later." Jennifer, serving her reduced sentence at a medium security facility in Nevada, had committed herself to rehabilitation programs and regularly attended therapy. Her letters expressed remorse that seemed genuine, though I had learned the hard way that appearances could deceive. Still, the prison counselor reported her progress as significant, noting her work helping fellow inmates earn their GEDs. Alex remained unrepentant, refusing all contact and occasionally sending threatening letters through various third parties, all of which were intercepted by law enforcement. His appeals had been denied, and additional charges continued to mount as investigators uncovered more aspects of his criminal enterprise. While the wound of their betrayal would never completely heal, I had found a way to contain the pain rather than being consumed by it. My volunteer work with parents of incarcerated children provided purpose, allowing me to transform my experience into support for others navigating similar devastating terrain. The twins, Jacob and Thomas, now 13, remained in Arizona with Sophia's parents. While still cautious, they had begun accepting monthly video calls, their initial awkwardness slowly melting into genuine conversation. Jacob had inherited Frank's talent for woodworking, while Thomas excelled in mathematics, frequently asking for help with homework during our calls. "You know," he said as we washed dishes after the birthday celebration, "I've been thinking about that bathroom renovation that brought us together. Never did finish it, did we?" I laughed the sound, still surprising me sometimes. "I think we had slightly bigger issues to address." His eyes crinkled warmly. "Well, this kitchen faucet of yours has a persistent drip. As a professional plumber, I find it personally offensive." His teasing kindness represented everything that had helped me survive. Finding moments of normalcy and even joy amid circumstances I never could have imagined enduring. The greatest victory came when Lily received her college acceptance letter to the University of Colorado's psychology program. "I want to understand people," she explained, "why they make the choices they do, how families function and dysfunction. Then maybe I can help others like us." Her resilience astounded me daily. She had lost both parents to prison, endured the public shame of their crimes, and completely rebuilt her identity. Yet she approached life with a wisdom and compassion that humbled me. "You know, Grandma," she said one evening, as we walked through our neighborhood, "I've been thinking a lot about secrets and truth. Mom and Dad created this elaborate lie they thought would make us happy, or at least wealthy. But all it did was poison everything it touched." Her insight struck me profoundly. "What's your conclusion?" I asked. "That truth is always better than comfort. Always. Even when it hurts so much you think you can't bear it." She squeezed my hand. "Like when you chose to face the truth about them instead of pretending nothing was wrong. That was real love, not what they did." As spring arrived in Colorado, I made the difficult decision to write a memoir about our family's journey. Not for public consumption or financial gain, but as a record for my grandchildren, when they were old enough to understand the full complexity of what had happened. The writing process proved therapeutic, allowing me to examine events with the perspective of distance while preserving important truths that might otherwise be lost. Diana encouraged this project during our monthly lunches. "Controlling the narrative matters, Ellie. Don't let rumors or court records be the only account your grandchildren ever read. Give them your perspective, your heart." The final chapter of my memoir focused not on the crimes or betrayal, but on the rebuilding that followed. I described the garden Lily, and I planted behind our apartment building how nurturing growing things had helped heal us both. I detailed the relationships that sustained us and the difficult but necessary work of creating boundaries that protected without isolating. On a brilliant June morning, as Lily and I transplanted tomato seedlings into our garden plot, I found myself reflecting on the journey from that fateful day, when Harold first discovered the suspicious pipes leading to my basement. The path had led through unimaginable darkness, but had ultimately brought me to a place of hard-won peace. "You're smiling," Lily noted, brushing soil from her hands. "Just thinking about how life never takes the path we expect," I replied. "Sometimes the most painful detours lead to places we needed to find." She nodded with understanding beyond her years. "Like this garden. We never would have planted it if we were still in Pennsylvania." "Exactly." I gestured to the community plots surrounding ours, where neighbors of all ages tended their plants. "And we never would have found this community." The simple truth I had learned through fire was that love requires both compassion and courage. compassion to understand human frailty, and courage to face difficult truths rather than comfortable illusions. My children had failed that test catastrophically, but their failure had ultimately taught me and Lily the value of living authentically. That evening, as lightning bugs began to twinkle in the community garden and neighbors gathered for an impromptu potluck, I felt Frank's presence more clearly than I had since his death. Not in grief or regret, but in the certainty that he would approve of the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal, a life of dignity, truth, and genuine connection. What would you do if those closest to you betrayed everything you believed about them? Could you find the courage to start over? I hope my story helps you reflect on the foundations of your own relationships. Are they built on truth or comfortable illusions? Remember that real love always chooses truth, no matter how difficult. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear this message. And I would love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for walking this journey with me, and may you find the strength to face whatever truths await in your own life.